Let's have a good time. Now then, we have kind of a lot to do today, but as I promised you, I think, because we're starting a new unit, and because, honestly, your primary focus should be on your papers, which you do Friday, right? Today isn't gonna, my goal is for today to not feel too intense, right? I want to start the conversation about paper 2. I have found in the past, actually, that beginning this conversation can help some students think in a slightly different way about paper 1, so there's that, perhaps. But yeah, mostly talking, mostly thinking about stuff out loud, not a lot of like righties and things like this, okay? Of course, by the end of class, if you have questions about paper 2, or again, at the front of our minds, probably paper 1, anything at all, we'll address those as well. Cool. All right. To begin with, this is on Courstan. Like pretty much anything I show you is, but I have it here. If you want to follow along at home, you can pull it up on your screen. But what we have, the critique. First of all, the kind of tail of the tape here. Length 3 pages, not 2 to 3 pages, like paper 1. Okay, so this guy needs to, at the very least, be sniffing the bottom of that 3rd page. You could be a few lines short of the bottom of the 3rd page. Anything less than that, it's short. 25% of your grade, which is significant. Format, same as everything you will ever give me in MLA. Source text, you have a choice here. Last time you had one text, we're all writing about the documentary. This time, there's a John Oliver video that we're going to talk about today, and there's a Rogan and Pacman podcast / video that we're going to talk about next time. You choose one, to be clear. Every so often, some goofball tries to write about both. Don't be that goofball. Pick one, okay? If you pick both, you're just going to compare them. That's not what we're doing, okay? So I'm stressing this. Pick one. Okay. What the paper is, and it's due the 3rd of March. So we have a bit of time. What the paper is. As always, I'm not going to read this at you. It's here for you if you want to check it out later. Basically, I would explain it this way. The critique takes what we do in paper 1, so you're still identifying arguments and more specifically rhetorical strategies in making those arguments. Okay, that's part 1. The part that we add for this paper, you're critiquing. You're telling me whether you think that rhetorical strategy works or doesn't, whether you think it does a good job or it doesn't, or somewhere in between, okay? So, to give you an example, in The Social Dilemma, when Isla cries, right, in the mirror, we talked about that moment. It's a pretty big moment in the movie. Clearly, the filmmakers are trying to affect you emotionally, maybe have some bit of sympathy for this young girl, right? That's the rhetorical strategy in play there. If we were critiquing that scene, we would then go a step further and say, well, I thought the crying maybe was a bit much, right? If we're monsters. Another scene that would work, when she breaks the lockbox, that, for some of you I know, seemed like a little over the top. Like no one is really going to do that, maybe. Maybe you could negatively critique that moment, right? Everything leading up to it is fine, but right here at the end of the scene when she breaks the lockbox with the goggles, almost like a cartoon character, and runs off with her phone, we lose the viewer there, right? It's not believable anymore, this sort of thing. That's the mode we're working in for this paper. Any questions at this stage? Okay. What we're going to do now, we're going to practice some critique. Some notes about what we're going to look at. I'm going to flip the lights around so you can see the screen a little better. We're going to watch a trailer for a movie, okay? Now it is older. It's an older movie. I expect none of you have seen it, and if you have, that's an interesting decision on your part. But whatever the case, it's kind of fine if you haven't seen it. I think it's actually better because what is the job of a movie trailer? What's the number one job a movie trailer is trying to do to you?
To get you to watch the movie.
Exactly. So the ideal audience is someone who hasn't seen the movie, potentially hasn't even heard of it. Our goals here are two things. One, watching this trailer, as you watch it in the back of your mind, anything stand out to you as significant? Again, the main argument, I was worried that was me, real talk. I was like, oh God, it's so much worse when it's me. The main argument here is you should see this movie. And so if we're critiquing it, we're thinking about whether or not the trailer sells us on that argument, right? And of course, just like we did with Social Dilemma, you're looking for specific pieces of evidence, moments from the trailer that stand out, this sort of thing. The second thing we can do, and I just want to introduce this to you, we're going to talk about it more after we watch it. How do we judge a trailer? You know, what makes a good trailer, what makes a bad trailer, this sort of thing. I just want that in the back of your mind as you're watching it. All right. We tried to watch it back in the day. It's a little bit older. We made it about halfway. Because it's not the sort of movie you watch because you assume it's good. You watch it because you assume it's bad. And we were right. So, anyway, so look, all that out of the way. You guys are laughing a little bit, which is perfectly justified given what you just saw. I'm curious. I guess first we can have just a conversation. What about that trailer stood out to you? Maybe we can even start with why the laughter? Yeah.
The plot line, like it's all over the place. There's no cohesiveness to it.
Maybe. Let's drill down on it a little bit. Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, they first start out from like a romantic.
Feels like a love story for like the first half-ish,
Yeah,
right?
and they switch just throw us into something.
Yeah. And then it's supposed to be a scary movie, as it turns out. Yeah. What do you have back there, Luigi?
Oh, the acting really bad.
Ah!
Animation's terrible.
Well, there's that too. All right. So let's. We got the kind of big ones up. The story is kind of terrible. The acting, in defense of the actors, I don't know that they have the easiest job, right?
Yeah.
Come out here with coat hangers and swing at, I'm going to look good, right? No, you're not. All right. Right, like, so, yeah.
He was so spacey though, like he was looking at the wall topic, like
Oh, the main character?
yeah.
Yeah.
I thought the acting at the beginning was really bad.
Yeah, the protagonist is pretty wooden. Yeah, and then of course the big one is we'll call it not even just the animation, but the effects. All the effects are,
The birds are terrible.
yeah. Fun story about that. Apparently, because again, we looked some of this up. The guy had an animator for the movie, and then he refused to pay him, so the animator didn't give him the final product. So that's the stand-in stuff. He just used that because the guy had already given it to him, which is why it looks like that. Anyway, all right. So that's all up in the air, much like the birds, and we're gonna take a half step back, and I want to think about, now that we've mulled on this for just a minute, how do you judge a trailer? Again, we said job number one, the primary goal is get you to see a movie, right? But it does that in small ways. Small aspects might encourage you, might get you excited, whatever it is. So maybe in light of whatever it was I just had you watch, how do trailers get you to go see a movie?
You get kind of curious about it.
In what way? Again, I mean, it may help if you think about a particular trailer or.
Like cliffhangers, because you don't know what the birds are going to do, so now you're kind of like interested.
Okay. So.
I don't know.
Oh no, my marker's.
Come on, there you go. Just let them attack out some birds.
Yeah. Okay. Make you curious or excited? Sure. Can we think about particular aspects of a trailer? So again, if it helps, this is apparently meant to be a horror film. And I know some of you are fans of horror, which is a strange thing to me. But when you see a trailer for a horror movie, how does it typically, like, what aspects maybe are you looking for that will grab you?
The music.
Music, and this trailer definitely has some music.
I want an action pack.
Got that too, to be clear. There's for sure some action that I think we'll talk about here in a moment. I'm gonna try another marker. Atmosphere, I like that. Ooh, yeah, that marker's good. Okay, what else? We mentioned actors a moment ago. I'll get some of the stuff we mentioned. Effects we had. And maybe tag on to action, I'll put story. Or maybe that should be with atmosphere, I don't know. But can you guys think of any? Yes?
Visuals that portray the story,
Do I know?
like the visuals that help with the story.
Like effects? Or are you thinking about something else? Like cinematography?
Yeah.
Okay. That can be, yeah. Sometimes that can be hard to take from a trailer because it's so quick. But yeah, I might add that to effects. Just how it's shot is what that means. Cinematography. Okay. Anything else that just stands out to you guys? Yes.
I guess like thinking cohesive like storyline.
Yeah. No, yeah, I would.
Okay.
Well, and again, sometimes that can be hard to judge from a trailer. So, for instance, one of the cardinal sins of a trailer, and horror, you don't see it as much. A lot of times you'll see it with bad comedies. Like, if you go see a comedy and you walk out and you're like, they put all the funny shit in the trailer. That movie was trash. Right? But what that means is the trailer worked. The movie didn't. The trailer was fire. Right? So it's kind of... All right. Yes. What?
Oh, I was like saying so like the hook and the cliffhanger.
Yeah. Cliffhanger would tuck into there, but yeah, and hook maybe here. At least those are the two, I think, primary ways we could talk about it. Okay. So when it comes to this trailer, and we started this conversation a moment ago, but I think now maybe we can focus it a bit. It can either be something we already brought up, or it can be a new thing that you're just not thinking of. Specific elements that you might use to determine whether or not this is a good trailer. What do you think? What stood out to you guys about the trailer?
That they were using coat hangers and that they were standing outside of the car instead of getting in the car.
Oh, like kind of nonsense. I mean, again, and you wouldn't know this from the trailer, they do eventually either get in the car. I think that, I want to say they're fighting their way to a car or something. But yeah. Yeah. Well, and to me, I wonder if that's tied to effects in this case. Because again, the actors are swinging at nothing. And at the very least, if it were, bigger budget, I think is part of the issue with this trailer/movie. It would look more real, so maybe you'd be more inclined to believe that like they're in danger, right? But again, all that, the rabbit hole on that starts with the shitty effects, and it trickles down to everything else, right? It makes everything else bad as a result, for sure. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I thought you were gonna.
I guess they like use the girl as a sexual appeal.
Yeah, love interest slash potential sex object, because like she's scantily clad at one point. What about that?
Other than like a couple of scenes, I would always like look at her body or like she would be in bra.
Well, in the one scene where she's not wearing a lot of clothes, it's pretty clear that they're about to throw down like that. Like that's what that is, right? Like, but my question, and again, the question we're trying to answer is, in terms of a trailer, in terms of getting people to go see the movie, how might that factor in when it comes to our expectations for trailers? You know? Do you think it makes people more inclined, less inclined to go see it? What do you think?
It definitely makes people more inclined.
You think more inclined?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In general, I think so. And again, as you guys are sometimes fond of saying, there's almost never going to be 100%er for anybody. Somebody would see that and go, yes. But generally, people enjoy people taking their clothes off in movies. Also, context is important. They are supposed to be, I guess, in love, or whatever you're going to call whatever they are. And the first half of the trailer sets it up to where, so like I would say at least it makes sense, right? We could tie it back to the story. It doesn't come out of nowhere. She's not ripping her clothes off for no reason, right? So both of those, what you guys are talking about, I think in some ways comes back to believability. If you can believe what we're seeing in this, like it makes sense in some way. For Alicia's point, no. For your point, yeah. I mean, again, the movie itself is probably awful, but this particular aspect, as represented in the trailer, it doesn't break the suspension of disbelief, if you're familiar with that phrase, right? Cool. So we have kind of a negative critique and kind of a positive critique, actually. Did you have your hand up again? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I was gonna say with like, kind of like, maybe not being with you when they were talking about the polar bears.
What about that?
Just randomly came out of nowhere.
Well, it was part of that transition, right? It was, the music shifts, but it doesn't hard shift yet, if you take my meaning.
They like talked about it for a bit, but then they set it up to where it was just about the Eagles and they just.
Yeah, well, it's like some kind of news story. It's really quick, as trailers are. So, did anybody pick up on what they're trying to do there with the polar bear business before they get into the birds stuff? They have a guy coming to their door selling solar power. They have another guy in a mask later who's like, "These birds are sick" or whatever. Right? Did anybody pick up on what they're kind of putting down there? Yeah, but why?
I thought they were talking about climate change.
Yeah. Yeah. This movie's got big ideas. You know? I mean, if I'm trying to play devil's advocate, in terms, like, I think a lot of us like our movies to have something more to them, you know? It's not just horror, it's like some environmental aspects, some kind of like, I'm not saying it's done well, which might be part of your point, okay? But I think that's what it's attempting. So again, when we were critiquing it, we would have to set it up that way, right? Cool. Other points. We haven't talked about the effects. I mean, we mentioned it earlier. Let's talk about the birds. What about those?
You can tell it's fake.
Okay. What's wrong with that? Talk to me like I'm dumb. What's wrong with the birds being terrible?
It might pull you away from it,
Why does that matter in this particular context?
because you're trying to get people to come and watch it, and if they see that, they're.
But again, what kind of movie is it?
It's a movie about birds.
It's supposed to be a horror movie.
It's a horror movie. So okay, if it was a comedy, which it kind of unintentionally is, that would be okay. If it was clearly supposed to be funny, and then you see the birds and you're like, then it's doing its job, right? So context matters. Everything I've seen from the guy that made this movie, and again, I've watched half of it, which I feel like deserves some kind of an award. He was serious.
It's a middle school project.
Yeah, well, it's indie, like it's not a lot of money, but anyway, it is supposed to be a horror film. It's supposed to terrify you, and we can't do that when the monster is silly. It can't. That's what it is, right? And again, we're talking about believability, suspension of disbelief, and it does not. As soon as those birds show up, that's out the window, like forevermore. You can't. Yeah. So we mentioned music a moment ago. Let's talk about the music. I don't know if you guys can hear it, and I've seen this trailer a bunch. But right before the music really kicks in, the singer, I guess, whispers, "The calm before the storm," and then you hear birds, and then it swells. What do you guys think about that?
I don't remember that.
So
I really
I almost feel like we could watch it again. And again, in defense of that guy, he clearly had to write a song about Birdemic, so he just went with this is Birdemic, and he just says it a bunch. Remembering that this is meant to be a serious horror film, right? That it's gonna.
Nothing.
Well, if we're just thinking about the music, does the music, how would we judge it? Does it fit, I guess, thematically, contextually?
You
I'm gonna be honest, not really.
I mean, if it was finished. anybody-
Well, so I guess what I'm saying is, like, again, the movie itself is not good. We agree on that. We agree on that. And the music, if I'm being totally transparent, is not my, choice of music. But what I'm asking, if we were to write a body paragraph about the musical selection here, right? There's kind of two ways we could go about it. Number one is the transition, because again, it's almost like you're in a shopping mall type music before when they're doing the love story stuff. It makes me feel like people are just doing this around, like power walking. And then it shifts into the calm before the storm business and the guy screaming about Birdemic. Does that transition work or not work in your opinion? And then also, again, does the musical choice, like the style of music, does that make sense to you or not in terms of whatever this filmmaker, yeah.
I think the music makes it funnier, especially
Why?
because it's this hard rock horror. Like it's Birdemic, and then it's just the birds coming over like somewhere in the hotel.
So, because I don't want to misunderstand you, are you saying because the music clearly is so serious, like the associations we have with that kind of music, it's like you're burning churches and shit, right? Like it's really dark, kind of, And because that reinforces this atmosphere that maybe they're hoping for, that laid over the top of kindergarten-esque, special effects, makes it even worse. Is that what we're saying? That's an interesting point. So again, if, and this is not the case, but if the movie had really good effects, if maybe he had paid that guy, for the finished product, and that music kicks in, maybe it works. At the very least, it works better. But maybe it works. But here you're saying there's a contrast between the musical selection and like the kind of movie it's meant for and the movie we actually have. Good. That's really smart. Yes, ma'am.
I guess just going off from other horror movies.
Yeah,
They tend to have more of an eerie feel, and that
they can, especially like in the 70s. I don't know, man. I mean, I haven't seen any horror film lately because I'm a total bitch when it comes to horror movies. Like I don't do that. But in my day, I guess it's when like Rob Zombie was getting really big, and it felt like there was a lot of, there's a lot of stuff like that.
like I guess the music creates suspense.
Yeah. Well, and two, this movie, I don't know if this is a very suspenseful movie. It seems more like an action horror movie, like a slasher, if you're familiar with that term. A lot of blood, a lot of birds exploding. I don't know if you guys caught it, and we're going to move on very soon to like actually what we're talking about, but there's one quick moment in the movie where they shoot some birds, and I guess they explode, and their guts fly all over them. And it's very clearly somebody off camera with a bucket of something just going, ha! And like, no, it's them shooting and the birds exploding, and like this yellow liquid just, it's only for a moment in the trailer, but it's a good one. All right. So the reason we did all that, what I want you conscious of as we start to talk about Oliver here for the next little bit, what we're doing in this movie, what we're doing in this paper is a two-step process as opposed to a one-step process. The first step is what we did in paper one, and hopefully what you're doing right now because it's due on Friday, right? What argument is the text trying to make? And then our work is, how does the text go about making that argument to you? So the trailer really wants you to buy into the fact that this could be terrifying, that this is a horror film, and at many steps along the way, it doesn't, right? So that would be largely a negative critique, I think. The only positive critique I could think of, I feel like the love interest, the blonde lady, I think she's all right. Like in the couple lines she has in the trailer, and maybe that's only because I compare her to the other people and they're not good. But like she seemed scared. She seemed like, I don't know. But either way, that's the second part. We're taking the rhetorical strategy from whatever video you choose for this time, identifying it, and then saying whether or not we think it does its job, whatever we think that it's aiming at. Does that make sense? Kind of. All right. Time is about right. Ooh, all right. That's about on schedule. All right, here's what we're gonna do now. I guess the play's okay. Here's what I'm thinking of doing. Similarly to what we did the first day we started talking about social dilemma, I just want to watch the opening. And you can do one of two things, right? But the main approach I want you to take for today, anything you notice, right? This is where it starts. It always starts with evidence. Anything at all that stands out to you, it could be something the guy says, something you see on screen, because again, this is a visual medium. It can be music. It can be any number of things. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about what you think he's arguing, because that's what we got to do. But our main goal always is, how is he making that argument? How is he trying to convince you? He's going to go about it in some pretty different ways, I think, from the social dilemma at times. So it's worth talking about. All right. I'm going to play it just for a minute or two, and we'll see what happens. We tried a little more. Now we're almost 3 minutes deep. Anything that stood out to you guys? Anything at all? Could be something he said, because he does a lot of that. Can be something we see on screen. Your hand up, I can't tell.
Yeah.
Own it, man. Come on. No? I didn't know that was the deal breaker. I'm sorry. You're good. Well, it's hard to see when you know. So anyway, go for it. What's up?
Like the laughing soundtrack, as he's like.
Oh, you guys are funny. You think that's recorded, don't you?
Okay.
This never happens. See, this is weird. I've taught this for a couple years, like 2 or 3 years now. This never happened before last semester. And I had somebody say this last semester, and I was like, you just assume that's recorded.
Well,
That's funny.
it's either that or like when they're telling them to laugh.
But you never see that. Those are assumptions. He occasionally shows his audience, there's nothing like that. But it's just funny to me. Like, I don't know what that is. I can't solve, you guys do that. Does anybody else, you just assumed it was recorded or they had a sign?
I think
They think it's the sign. They tell them like to applaud.
But there's no, that's weird.
Well, you can tell it's like kind of blurred. Like
A
the laugh.
lot of TV shows. I don't know if that's what a lot of TV shows like that.
Some will, I guess. I mean, especially back in the day when like Full House was on TV and stuff, yeah. That's just funny to me. I don't know what that is. It's a super recent development.
I think because like we're used to it being fake, like on TV shows, everything.
I think that's part of it, yeah.
It's the Disney platform.
The hell is that?
It's
She's got a play.
it's like when in Disney, like they'll do something funny and then you hear like the soundtrack or people like laughing like forcibly.
Like in a movie?
No, like in like Disney shows, like.
Like what? I just don't know.
Or just in a show in general, they'll start laughing.
They'll start laughing.
That's
You
what it sounds
really
like.
think like it's not really.
But it's a scripted show you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, you're describing acting, I think.
But it's like you can tell how they laugh.
You sometimes can, for sure.
It's not in the show. It's like,
I mean, again, to play devil's advocate a little bit, this is just what audiences sound like when they laugh, usually.
But they're not really filming in front of like live audience.
He for sure is.
And we know that him, I didn't assume that it was fake.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm saying like for Disney, it's not.
Sure. I still don't know what.
It just sounds like the laughs sound familiar to like the ones from Disney. Like they sound.
Yeah.
They
well,
sound a
could-
bit forced. Or,
Yeah. That's funny. Okay, so to help a little bit, to the best of my knowledge, it's not recorded and I've never seen any signs. And granted, they could hide them, I suppose. But my bigger point here is you want to have evidence for your observations. And we really don't have any to say that it's recorded or that you see what I'm saying? So it might be a bit of a misstep to begin with, just because we can't prove our initial observation.
Well, it's not that, it's just like the laughing when he like says something like,
When he makes a haha.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not funny.
It's not too
I feel like
funny.
it's not no general audience type of thing.
Well, but here's another
I don't know
question.
who Chris Tucker is, so I'm not like,
Chris Tucker.
but whatever his name is.
Tucker Carlson
Yeah.
is so different from Chris Tucker. They are. I could not think of people that are more opposite.
When I said it out loud, I figured it out.
Okay.
They are
Super
John
different people.
Oliver.
Wow. Yeah. No, I know his mistake.
I guess it's not us resonating with John Oliver's here.
For sure. No, this brings up an interesting point that I thought we were going to do later, but we can do it now. One conversation you always have to have when it comes to critique, if you're going to critique fairly, and that's what we're aiming at, right? You have to consider audience. So, for instance, I would hazard you guys might not be the audience for this. It's probably, and I want your input on this, I'm curious, but it's probably for what kind of person? How do you envision the kind of person this is meant for? Yes?
Like middle age?
Easy. I'm wildly curious. What do you think of when you think of middle age?
30,
My parents.
30s?
30, 30, like 35, like 50.
That's like.
Time out. Time out.
30s is not old.
30 is.
Real talk.
30 is
You understand we call it middle age because it means you're halfway through with your life, right?
What is it, 40?
So you're just envisioning people dying at 60?
30 is number 40.
My parents.
Hit upper 40s, 50s. Upper 40s, 50s.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel bad saying that because my parents are in the 40s.
I
Upper
just-
I would
40s,
say my
50s.
parents. My
I
parents
didn't
are in
think
their late
30s, I
40s.
thought like 40 and up.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's, okay.
40's not bad.
Not bad. No one said it was bad.
Like 45.
What are you? Okay. Okay. Now that was a total side conversation, but we needed to have it really quickly. Whether or not, we won't use the term middle age just yet because the definition seems to be slippery. But 30s, 40s, and up feels like a consensus? I think so. So look, what that means is, in critiquing this, you kind of have to own from the outset it's not really meant for you, probably, right? In the same way that we're going to do the Joe Rogan podcast next week, I don't know if that's meant for all of you either, but it's at least it skews younger, so like parts of it you may appreciate more, and that's got to be part of the conversation. So rather than it's not funny, which maybe again to you guys, you have to consider to the best of your ability his audience, like who he's aiming at, as difficult as that might be. But does that make sense? Okay. So with that in mind, and we can start from, and this may be part of where it's coming from, the assumption that the laughter is recorded and whatnot. The jokes are a big part of the show, right? This is clearly, and I don't know if you're old enough to know this. Do most of you know what The Daily Show is? I don't know if it's okay. It originated when I was a child. It's really old. He used to be on it a long time ago. All right, and this show, I think, pretty clearly is it's pretty much The Daily Show, but on HBO, so he can say fucking stuff. Like that's the difference mainly. So it's got that vibe. Clearly talking about a pretty serious sort of public issue, right? But he's going to make jokes the whole time. It is worth considering if the jokes are funny, because if they're not, then it's terrible. All of a sudden, we're having a similar conversation to Birdemic, right? Birdemic wants to scare you, and it doesn't. So, ew. Here, let's talk about this. And we can have an honest conversation, because it is a good place to start. None of it is funny. I'm asking.
But he said the trailer.
Oh, the trailer's hilarious. But no, this.
I thought the first minute he was funny until he started talking about the guy that I didn't know.
Well, so again, to be fair to the text, if you don't know who Tucker Carlson is, those jokes won't land for you. Just because you don't know who he is.
I mean,
You know what I'm saying?
like I know who he is, but
Yeah.
I still don't find it funny.
The thing when he says, if the sound thud grew a face, I think that's hilarious. Because he shows a picture of his, he fucks his Roomba.
The hashtag was kind of funny.
I thought it was funny, just because it's bananas. It's just a crazy thing to say. Yeah. So, and again, it's not like,
I mean, it's funny to his audience, I just.
Yeah.
Not for me.
okay, oh, and that's
Yeah,
cool.
like, I know he probably, for his audience, is really good at it.
He's all right. Okay, all right. So what we could do, if we wanted to say, write a body paragraph, because that's of course what we're aiming at eventually. And we wanted to talk about jokes. Honestly, you could write your whole paper on jokes in this video because it's chock full of them. Maybe one body paragraph. You have a positive critique of some of the jokes. Let's go down this track just a little bit. The first question always has to be, is a joke funny or not, right? Because that's what they're for. There can be secondary concerns though. Especially in a show like this. I don't think he's just trying to tell jokes, right? Like it's not a stand-up special. What's he also trying to do with probably most at least of these jokes?
Like, why do they
For sure, that's part of it too. But more than that, a lot of these jokes are trying to do something. It's entertain, obviously, is kind of what we're getting at. But there's a big other part to this show. What do you guys think it is? He wants to entertain you and also what?
Inform you?
Inform you. Yeah. And so I think when we're talking about his jokes, that has to at least be in the back of our mind. And again, it's not like every joke, Tucker Carlson fucks his Roomba. I don't think,
I feel like that was kind of funny.
yeah, but I don't think there's information in that one. And it wouldn't be fair to go, that can't be accurate. And it's like, yeah, no shit, that's it. So that, well, but that's what I mean when I keep saying fairness. If we're fair to the text, because I've had people do this in the past, try to say something like, no one could ever have sex with a robot vacuum cleaner. I'm like, I can't believe I'm reading this. You want to be fair to the text. You want to be fair to the text, okay? If we're fair, what is he aiming at in that particular moment? I think he just wants to be funny. He also is telling you something about his opinion of Tucker Carlson. What's his opinion of Tucker Carlson? Even if you don't know who he is.
Probably didn't like it.
Doesn't like that guy. Doesn't even like him much at all. Okay. And there's reasons for that, which may or may not be clear in the video, but that's the information he's giving you. He wants to entertain you, and the information in this case is, I fucking hate this guy, basically. If you feel like he does those reasonably well, there's probably a positive critique in that case, right? And later on in this unit, we'll get more into why. But that's the argument probably in that paragraph. Okay? Jokes that don't work. For the sake of time, we're not going to zoom around the video. We may do this at a later date. Can anybody, off the top of your head, think of jokes that like just don't work?
Like racist shows?
No, in the video.
Oh.
Always in the text. Like racist jokes? Yeah. What's your best one? No. Like he's got a joke in there about horse wine with a lady trying to drink wine out of a cup that she's holding in her arm like a horse. Exactly. It's not funny. It's really long and bad.
Did they laugh at it?
I think the laughter is muted at that point, if memory serves. So again, it's like, I do wonder in that case if they're laughing to be polite almost at that one. There's also a thing that happens when you're at a comedy show where you just laugh more because other people are laughing. That's like a real thing. But in that case, we might negatively critique, number one, because it was not very funny. Like, why are we talking about horses for this long? And two, there's no information in that section. He's talking about a hypothetical woman at a party that doesn't exist and horses. It's strange. That could be a negative critique, perhaps. What time is it, by the way?
120.
Sweet. All right. A couple more. We brought up jokes, and again, that would be a primary concern, I think, anybody talking about this one. Anything else stand out to you? Again, it can be something he says. It could be anything you see on screen. For instance, what about this? What is?
This is
Why is he wearing that? Sure.
kind of like he's trying to be like a newsmaker.
Yes. Which, at least traditionally, would be weird. Because it's a comedy show, right? Why do you think he's dressed professionally?
Give an image of a news anchor.
Yeah, give him this like a newsmaker.
For sure that, and what, someone else over here?
He's trying to inform the other.
Maybe, and it might be possible to marry those two, but like what might it do to be dressed this way? When you see a guy like that, what assumptions do you make about him?
Like he knows what he's talking about,
Why?
and the way he is dressed.
Yeah, but so there's one step we're missing, like
Where do you associate suits with like, with power, with
And?
credibility?
Great, you said credibility? Very good. Yeah. For sure we do that. He must know what he's talking about. He's got a tie. Those are hard. Yeah. And again, it's interesting because this isn't, I mean, it kind of is, but it's also not a news show, right? So he has that aura about him that super depends on credibility. Like, I'm going to tell you some real things while making a lot of jokes along the way. I feel like that's a hard line to walk, you know? Any other thoughts on the suit? Does it make sense in this video to you? I think we can always in some way come back to that, right?
Kind of has like the background of news anchors do.
Yeah. Well, and also like a late night news comedy show. Again, like the Daily Show. Ultimately, so many of these shows now. Colbert has one, right? Like so many. They all look like this. They all have suit. They all have some kind of cityscape behind them. But the point there is, I think we expect that stuff in this kind of show. And so it meets those expectations. It checks that box. Which is a positive critique, right? If he wasn't dressed professionally, if he was dressed more like me, maybe it would stand out. Maybe it would feel odd given the context, right? And it does hinge on credibility, weirdly. Talk to me about this. I want to have a brief conversation about this. I'm interested if anyone has thoughts on that. Yes, ma'am.
They use like the scarlet letter.
They do. Who here knows what the Scarlet Letter is? Some of you were maybe asked to read it in high school and then didn't. Does that ring any bells? I saw a couple people nod. It's better than you think it is. Honestly, it's not bad. Do you know what the Scarlet Letter is about?
Pretty much, they're just like the like.
Give us the gist. Oh, all right. I'll put you on the spot. All right. Puritan New England. So we're talking late 17th century, okay, or early 18th. Long time ago. People pooped in the woods, that kind of thing. And that's what you did. That's what you did. Anyway, Hester Prynne, who's the main character, has a relationship with a preacher and shouldn't do that. And she's made to wear the scarlet letter A for an adulterer. She's an adulteress. And everywhere she goes, they can see that letter and they can judge her accordingly. They judge her harshly. And there's more to the story, but that's the gist of the letter itself. Okay? So, let's think about that. There's a couple ways we can do it. Number one, clearly that's intentional, right? It's even fancy, right? Kind of feels like if I said Puritan font, this might fit the bill. right? Somehow? What about putting the scarlet letter in there? What does that help us do? Yes, ma'am?
It's like associated with like shaming.
For sure, with public shaming. Yeah. So it's on brand, we would say, given what they're trying to talk about? Okay. Yeah, we can get to the fingers, and obviously that's like everyone pointing at this one person. I kind of wish that guy would burst into flames. What else might it do? Let's have this conversation very quickly. So, for instance, did anybody else realize this was like a scarlet letter allusion? It's okay if you didn't. I'm not. This is an honest question. Anybody else? Did most of you not? That's cool. You guys are like 18, and we've already said you're not the target market, right? Okay. When I tell you, or I suppose when you read it tells us, that it's an allusion to the scarlet letter, when it's capital L literature, right? What do you think that does to the audience? And as best you can, not to you. Someone middle-aged, apparently, like me, who reads books and is gonna die soon, right? Like, when they see capital L literature, what do you think it might do to them?
I don't understand the reference.
Grab their attention? What'd you say?
Understand the reference.
That I think those are the same thing. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a nerd. When I see, this is like an Easter egg, if you're familiar with that concept, in a movie we like that, don't we? That little thing that we get that maybe not everybody else does, we're like, it makes you feel good. And in this context, capital L literature, goddamn, what time is it, fellas?
4:27.
Oh my God. All right. 140?
No, it's
It's like, am I living in a time warp?
27.
Jesus. The point I'm trying to make. Not only does it get your attention because you see the Easter egg and it makes you feel good, it makes you feel like you're somehow connected to what they're doing because you get that Easter egg, right? The kind of Easter egg this is reinforces, I would contend, something I like about me. I am a book nerd. Scarlet Letter, that's old. That guy's been dead a long time. Look at how smart I am for seeing that, right? That's an interesting rhetorical strategy. Not everybody would see this, right? But if you do, it's almost selling you on this idea you have of yourself, right? And how observant you are and how smart you are. And then it ties into what the video is about, which is even better. See what I'm saying? Cool. We've reached the question and answer portion of our day because several of you are preparing to leave. What questions do you have? We'll start with the second paper, with just what we introduced today. Anything at all that you're not sure about, or you have thoughts about, anything at all? Yes, ma'am.
So when we're taking paper, are we critiquing and then analyzing or analyzing and then critiquing?
I think actually. If you're saying, if analysis, as you're terming it, is what we did in the first paper, do that first. And then step 2 is critique it. I would add to that, critique is still part of your analysis. You have to explain to me why it's a good thing, why it's a bad thing, why maybe it's in between. Sometimes it can be in between. It's not really good or bad. That happens. Yeah. Or just like kind of good and also kind of bad. Like it can be that. But yeah. So to recap that, so if we were talking about his credibility, I think it helps, right, in the way that we talked about it, because he is trying to present information. At some point, I'm not going to ask how many of you watch this video because I'm worried about the number, but he's going to interview a person who was publicly shamed, and it's pretty real. Yeah, and there's a whole very serious section of this video. So it plays into that. But what's interesting is, does it take away from the jokes? Does it make it, or does it help somehow? That would be part of the conversation you have to have. So your critique is still analytical in this paper, if that makes sense. Did you have another question?
Sorry.
Go for it.
Because you were talking about how the jokes help, but
Mm-hmm.
throughout the interview, she's making jokes about herself as well.
She does. She does. What about that? Like,
What did it like a transition?
what do you mean?
Like from his jokes to her jokes, like in quote.
Well, you could, for instance, have a body paragraph about one or two of the jokes she makes. Not all of them are in reference to her, but some of them are. I think they talk at some point in the interview, like it seems like a real, like a coping mechanism, or like it's a way for her to signal that she's doing better with all that stuff, right? You could consider it in that light. Do you know what I mean? But again, the question would always be, like if we're thinking about the interview, and we'll talk about it in a later class when I'm more confident, more of you have watched the video. I mean, to make it super binary, do the jokes in the interview section help or hinder what they're trying to do? Mostly, I think they're trying to get you to see Monica Lewinsky as a person, right, who had to go through some awful stuff. And in that way, they want you to feel for her in some respect and all this. Well, do the jokes help or hinder that? I'm of a mind they help. Because, like, if you introduce me to a person who never jokes around about anything, that's a person I don't want to know, right? Like, that's strange. That's just like a robot to me. So it makes her seem more human is what I'm getting at in the argument I would concoct. I can see the flip side of the coin where I guess what they're talking about is serious, and so to joke about it maybe undercuts that, right? Maybe. But either way, like those are the kinds of arguments you would make in this paper. Does that, in a roundabout way, answer your question? Okay. Any other questions about paper 2? Stupendous. Questions about paper 1, which of course is due Friday night. Oh, didn't we talk about that? No? Oh, I got a whole thing. Let's do this. All right. Here, let me turn this off real quick. You guys are funny. You don't, in defense of you, you can't know what you don't know, right? And what you don't know is that conclusions don't matter. They don't matter. I really didn't tell you guys this?
You said it didn't matter, you didn't say anything else.
Oh.
Yeah. Didn't explain how they did that.
Oh, okay, sure. Many professors don't even read your conclusions. We got to read like 100 papers at a time when we get them. If I can chop one paragraph off of every essay, like that's how little conclusions matter, right? However, you do have to have them because we'll know if they're not there. You take my meaning. So the biggest point I'm trying to make to you, never stress about a conclusion. Write one. Take a real shot at one. Don't stress about it. It's not a big deal. Okay. In terms of what a conclusion is, because I know your real question is like, hey, motherfucker, how do you write them? This is a writing class. That's what you're asking me. The way I would describe it holistically, if your introduction is you're laying out a bunch of threads for your paper, you introduce the text, all that, but then your roadmap shows me each one of the points you're going to bring up. Your thesis kind of ties them together, and then every body paragraph, you're picking up one of those threads, and you're really looking at it really hard, okay? And they're all laid out, and then we get to the end of your paper, you're picking those threads back up again, and you're tying them back together, is what a conclusion should do. The way you guys are usually taught how to do them is what? I know you know this one. What are you supposed to do in a conclusion?
Basically, sum up.
Worst fucking thing you could do. Jesus. I've had people copy and paste their thesis statements into the conclusion. What planet am I on? What planet am I on? No. I've had people do it. People always do it. It's not you guys. It's every student that's come before you. And again, this is one of those things in defense of your teachers, because I have real thoughts about Not kind, not kind. But in defense of them, they are asking you to do something different. You're writing in-class essays. And this is how little conclusions matter, even in an in-class essay. What do I do for the restate? Who's fucking count? I'm going for a smoke. Like that's the approach to conclusions in an in-class essay. Okay? What you should do, and there's other strategies that again we could potentially get into later. I don't want to like info dump on you. Huh? Well, you want to. The way I always did it, I would always recommend an organic approach if possible. And what I mean by that is, I would write my paper, I would get to the end, I would take a break for like an hour, whatever. I'd go breathe, go outside, okay? Then I would come back, and this is after I've edited and stuff, and I would just read it. I would just read the paper straight through. And then when I got to where the conclusion should be, I would just write it. Because you have all of it in your head, and most of the time your head can organize it reasonably well, okay? But if you do it organically, you're gonna do just what I described most of the time. You're gonna pick up those threads, you're gonna start tying them together, because that's how your brain works, okay? And it just feels way less robotic. It's clearly not you going copy and paste, let's change some synonyms, right? Like, that's brutal. I would try the way I just described. A more like template kind of approach would be, you can almost do it this way. If you looked at all your body paragraphs and out to the side, if you summed them up like in the margins in a few sentences, that's your conclusion. Okay? And at the very end, you can cap that off with another sentence or two that somehow ties that stuff together. You're golden. Does that make a little bit of sense? I wanna remind, like, undergirding all of that is conclusions just do not matter. They really don't. But you do have to have them. And please don't restate your thesis. Good God. No, I'm not a monster, but it just irks me because I've had it for years, and people are allowed to teach you that, and it should be illegal. I want you to write like people that are smart. They want you to write like students that are dumb. That's the difference. Anyway, any other questions before I let you go? All right, a couple reminders. The other things I want to remind you of, our papers are due this Friday by midnight. So Friday night, 11:59. I pointed out last time, don't lie to yourself, don't trick yourself and say that will work for you. If it won't, whatever you're doing on Friday night, you might have to adjust that deadline for you. Anyway, the other things we're doing, Rogan and Packman. It's a podcast episode, the Joe Rogan podcast from a couple years ago with a guy named David Pakman. There's a link on Coursden, because I have to link you to it, okay? And I think Pakman's been on a few times. So you want to watch this particular episode. You can click on it, and it's going to take you to Spotify, and you're going to have to log in. That's weird to me. I've never really messed with Spotify, not on my phone, right? You can do it on a laptop. But I'm just saying you could also, if you just have the app, you can just do it that way, okay? You can find the episode number on Coursden if you're navigating it on your phone. The other thing I want to tell you, this is important, okay? I give you timestamps on the syllabus. Joe Rogan's episodes are like 3 hours long. You can listen to all of it if you want to. Or the syllabus asks you to listen to about a half hour of it. So I'm saying you want to go find those timestamps. Okay? The other point I'll make, and then I'm going to let you go. If you check it out on Spotify, which you have to now, there's also video. So you can just listen to it if you want, but if you want to have more options, you can also watch it. And you can see stuff they do and what they look like, and that can give you more ammunition for a paper. So that's an option. All right. That's all I got. I'll see you next week. Thank you, guys.